Call the meeting the Tullahoma Board of Mayor and Alderman meeting for Monday, September the 28th. Good evening, everyone. This evening, we have a public hearing on ordinance number 1544, an ordinance to amend the zoning map of the city of Tullahoma as set forth in the municipal code, which is ordinance number 1392, to rezone approximately 6/10 of an acre, parcels number 713, 715, and 717 on East Lincoln Street, from C2 general commercial district to district R3 for high density residential district. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak at the public hearing? If so, you'll be given 2 minutes. Please come forward, state your name and address. Hearing none, we will go directly into the regular meeting of the board. First, we'll have a roll call.
Mayor Miller?
I'm here.
Alderman Amaker?
Here.
Alderman Berry?
Here.
Alderman Blackwell?
Here.
Alderman Blanks?
Here.
Alderman Dunn?
Here.
Here we have a quorum of 6 members present. We'll have 7th one shortly. But first off, we'll invite Reverend Chevy Shields to do the invocation and then standing for the Pledge of Allegiance to Shields.
Mr. Mayor, I am not Reverend Shields, but
We're glad to have you this evening.
she was not able to be here, and she asked if I would offer this invocation in her place.
Pastor Wiggett, you're welcome.
Let us pray. Loving God, we give you thanks for the creation of this day. We thank you for the opportunity to come and together and to enjoy the work of our community. We ask your blessings upon all those gathered here, upon our mayor, our city council, upon all of our first responders and those who work so diligently to keep us safe. We ask that you would watch over us through this time of this meeting, guide and direct as only you can. And this we lift up and pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend Wade. This evening, do we have any commendations or certificates for this meeting? We do have some proclamations and awards. Have one for the Arts Council. I'd like to read that at this time. From the City of Tullahoma to the Arts Council and the Humanities Month for October 2020. Whereas the nation's 120,000 nonprofit arts organizations, the National Arts Endowment, and the National Endowment for the Humanities, the nation's 4,500 local arts agencies, and the Arts Humanities Councils of the 50 states and the 6 U.S. jurisdictions have regularly issued official proclamations on an annual basis designating October as National Arts and Humanities Month. Whereas the arts and humanities play a unique role in the lives of our families and our communities and the country, and whereas the cities and states, through their local and state art agencies and representing the thousands of cultural organizations, have celebrated the value and importance of culture in the lives of Americans and the health of thriving communities during the National Arts and Humanities Month for several years. Whereas the humanities help diverse communities across the United States explore their history and culture with the support and partnership of the National Endowment of the Humanities, the 55 state and territorial humanities council, and cultural, educational, and cultural institutions. Whereas the creative economy drives tourism and commerce, supports American workers, and makes up 4.5% of the annual GDP. Proposed federal legislation titled the Create Act 5.650 and H.R. 1519 and the Place Act 5.3232 would support economic development in the creative community. So now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Ray Norris, Mayor of Tullahoma, Tennessee, do hereby proclaim October as National Arts and Humanities Month in Tullahoma, and call upon our arts organization and community members to celebrate and promote the arts and culture in our nation, so to specifically encourage the greater participation of our citizens in taking action and attending arts and humanities opportunities in our community. September 28, 2020. Representatives of the Arts Council and South Jackson Humanities, please come forward for presentation. Congratulations, sir. And you have your Arts Council.
Arts Center.
Arts
Arts Center.
Center, Joshua County. Okay.
Should y'all stand here? Flat, like you lead us up?
This is our student representative.
Okay.
All right.
All right, do y'all want to do mask off, mask on? It's up to y'all. It won't be very long. All right, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Excellent. And wait for Aaron.
Come see a little bit closer. There we go. 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And we do have one more proclamation tonight, a very important proclamation to make. So this is Fire Prevention Week proclamation. We're glad to have our chief here tonight. So whereas the city of Tullahoma and the Tullahoma Fire Department is committed to ensuring safety and security of those living and visiting Tullahoma, and whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are in greatest risk from fire. Whereas home fires killed more than 2,630 people in the United States in 2017, according to the National Fire Protection Association. And the fire departments in the United States responded to 357,000 home fires. That's a bunch. Whereas cooking is the leading cause of home fires in the United States, and whereas fire departments responded to more than 173,000 annually between 2013 and 2017. And whereas 2 of every 5 house fires start in the kitchen, and with 31% of these fires resulting from unattended cooking. So whereas children under the age of 5 are at higher risk of non-fire burns associated with cooking than being burned in a cooking fire. And whereas Tullahoma residents should stay in the kitchen when frying foods on the stovetop and keeping 3-foot kid-free zone around the cooking area, and keeping anything that can catch fire away from the stovetops. And whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in reported home fires in half. And whereas Tullahoma's fire department and first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through the protection and prevention education, and whereas Tullahoma's residents are responsive to public education measures and are able to take personal steps to ensure their safety from fire, especially in their homes. And whereas the 2020 Fire Prevention Week theme, Serve Up Fire Safety in the Kitchen. That's Serve Up Fire Safety in the Kitchen. Effectively serves to remind us to stay alert and use caution when cooking to reduce the fire in our kitchens. So therefore now I, Ray Norris, Mayor of the City of Tullahoma, do hereby proclaim October the 4th, 4 through 10, 2020 as Fire Prevention Week in Tullahoma. And I urge all citizens of Tullahoma by checking their kitchens for fire hazards and using safe cooking practices during Fire Prevention Week 2020, and to support the many public safety activities and efforts of the Tullahoma Fire Department and Emergency Services. Chief, you come fire, I'd like to present this to you, sir. Chief, you're welcome to make some remarks.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor and Board, for recognizing this important time of the year. However, I will tell you that the Tullahoma Fire Department practices Fire Prevention Week all year long. We're always doing programs, installing smoke alarms, doing training, and we just appreciate the continued support of the board. And you know what the smoke alarm sound, what that sounds like, you know what that means. At my house, that means that supper's ready. But, you know, we also, this is known, is it? Anyway, be real careful cooking. That's where the fires are happening now. It used to be that smoking was the #1 cause of house fires, but thank goodness that's gone away, but something else has risen to the top now, and it's cooking. So just be extra careful, and if you have any questions, just feel free to call the fire department. Our community risk lady, Miss Melissa Allen, will be glad to help you any way she can.
Thank you, Chief, and congratulations on doing a great job for our community.
Thank you, Mayor.
At this time, we have one of the most important things we're going to be doing this evening. We're going to have the swearing-in ceremony for our newest alderman. So, Judge Conley, would you ask Miss Chernobyl McGee to come forward and be sworn in as our newest alderman?
If you would, please, young lady, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Chernobyl McGee,
I, Chernobyl McGee,
Alderman for the City of Tullahoma,
Alderman for the City of Tullahoma,
do affirm
do affirm
that I will faithfully,
that I will faithfully,
truly,
truly,
and impartially
and impartially
perform the duties
of said office
during my tenure
during my tenure
without fear,
without fear,
favor,
favor,
or partiality,
or partiality,
to the best of my skill
to the best of my skill
and ability.
and ability.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
If you would sign.
Alderman McGee, you may take your seat at the podium at the dais. Thank you, Judge. And welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor, usually we all had a chance to address and do public comments after we were sworn in. Would you like to give that opportunity to Ms. McGee?
We're going to get comments right now. It's next on the agenda. Okay, after the swearing-in ceremony, we will have our public comments from the citizens. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the board this evening? Hearing none, we'll move right into the agenda then. We'll go in now with our reports from members of the Board of Mayor and Alderman. And let's do a reverse tonight, and we'll start over on this side with Alderman Blackwell.
I feel like you did that because you know I always talk too much.
Well,
Okay, couple things. Meetings that I have attended since our last one, the school board meeting. I wanted to let you all know that at the last school board meeting, Kim Usselton was voted in as the new chair of the school board. And one other point that I want to make is that they did vote to fund a new bus. One of them is past the life expectancy, essentially, and mileage that's allowable. So they did vote to do that. We had a planning commission meeting that we had. I didn't see anything from that exact meeting on this agenda, so but that happened as well. I received the bylaws, first draft of bylaws from Stacy Lynch. Thank you for the Diversity Council, so thank you to her. That's been sent to the people who were on that committee for their review. Let's see, we had the domestic violence lethality review team meeting, and I'm excited to say that I've reached out to Dr. Stevens again this year, and we will be working with the school system to have that conversation that we had last year about healthy relationships with 7th graders. So looking forward to moving forward with that. Also, thank you to Kurt Glick for so much help with Jefferson Street Park updates. You know, a lot has happened over there, and you know, he gave me a call today to tell me that we are have a very lovely anonymous donor who is going to, I guess, fill the cracks and seal the courts for free in the spring. So that makes us have some more money to do some other stuff with. So thank you so much for all the work that he's been putting into that. Another thing I was going to say is that on October 8th will be my next Coffee and Conversations that I will be hosting. It's probably going to be at, I'm hoping, Camino Real. It's going to be from 3 to 5, October 8th. And the last thing I had was I wanted to make sure and see if it was feasible for me to change my vote at the last meeting to reflect that my support for Cernovia. Alderman McKee.
I object.
We'll bring that up in the
Minutes.
review the minutes.
Great.
Certainly. Alderman Dunn.
So I attended my last Housing Authority meeting a couple of weeks ago, and things are still tip-top over there. They're usually keeping things really nicely done. I think they were something at 97% capacity already, so they're doing really well. We have our next Go Green meeting is on October 5th. It's going to be next Monday at 5 o'clock. Anybody is welcome to attend. It'll be here in this room. And we're going to be discussing several things. The number one is our new watershed plan that our engineer and Butch Taylor put together, and it's pretty exciting. Now we've been trying to figure out the best ways to deal with our stormwater, and now we have an actual map to do it with. So lots of thanks to both Jim and Butch for putting that together.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Lawrence.
Thank you, Alderman Norris. Since our last meeting, I had an Arts Council Zoom meeting last Thursday night, and a lot of discussion. We have two seats vacant there, so if anybody's interested in being on the Arts Council and is interested in art in this community, please go on our website. You should be able to download that and turn that in. We'd love for you to help us. I had a Doug Thurber meeting last Wednesday night, and Normandy has plenty of water in it. We're selling water. It's good water. It's like voted the best water in Kentucky and Tennessee numerous times. So we have pretty good water. Also had a light tube meeting last week. Everything's going well there. We're like plus 14 on new sign-ups on light tube. So I think we're nearly to the 4,100 sign up on light tube. So everything's going well there. One thing that I would like to bring, to the board and to the public, our COVID numbers in the Coffee County are trending upward. Last Friday we had 44 new cases. That's the most we've had. If you look at the graph, and this is published data from the Tennessee Department of Health, the graph is going up. Today, I think this was published at 2 o'clock, we had 21 cases today. So, this ain't going away, boys and girls. We need to take it serious. We all, on this days, probably know somebody personally that has either had COVID or a family member that has had it. So it's important that we are diligent and wash our hands and do what we need to do from the recommendation of our governor and others in areas of authority. So I would encourage you, to wear a mask and do what you need to do. I know some of you don't necessarily believe in that, but, even if it's not true, put yourself aside and think of other people, because, we have, 13 or 14 deaths in this county. It can get you, especially if you're at risk. If you're young, not as much, but you can be a carrier to somebody that can be affected. So I'm going to get off my soapbox as Dr. Blanks and shot Tullahoma, and that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Blanks. Good report. Bad data, but good report from you. Ms. McGee, you've gotten the drill of the gist of things that are going around. So every week we tend to give a report on activity we've been involved in for the past couple of weeks. So anything that you'd care to share with us?
I have not been involved yet. I wanted to wait until after my swearing in, but my goal is I would like to be the voice for those communities who feel like they don't have a voice, to bridge that gap, because I want them to know that their concerns are just as important as everyone else's concerns. They make up this great city of Tullahoma, so I want them to feel comfortable bringing the concerns to the board. And also, once we get through this COVID, I want them to feel comfortable with coming to the city meetings, because making a presence is very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my first goal.
Your goals are commensurate with the entire board, so thank you for them. Alderman Berry.
Man, Mayor knows I drew a blank here. I drew a blank. The consolidated, the 911 center, I meant to talk about this last time. We had a study session over some stuff up there. There's a lot going on at our comm center and 911. And I think that it's one of the more important organizations in our county, as it can directly affect every single person in our county and surrounding areas. I encourage people to learn more about what is going on there. We are going to start meeting. We have been meeting only on even number months, starting in October. Because of a lot of things going on, we're going to start doing more study sessions and meeting monthly, because there's some big things coming and changes needed. The other two, there's not much going on the other two committees that I'm on. I do have a meeting with the Sports Council next, I think, October 24th. Aside from that, I've been coaching youth flag football, guys, and it is it's kindergarten through through third grade, so 5 through this tall. And Robert E. Lee, those teams were split into two, so I've been spending time at practices and games. We had our second game, and I joined a bowling league. So there you go. And I like long walks on the beach.
Wow.
Sounds like you're doing fun things. Alderman Mark.
Okay, so at the last meeting, it was kind of my first meeting, I was a little bit nervous. So I didn't really give a really good update of kind of what I had been doing, and I listened to what you all had said. So I'm going to kind of go back and tell you what I've done over the last month. My first week in office, second day in office actually, I went to one of Ms. Moody's staff meetings, and I got to meet all the department heads. And I'm going to have to, give her some props on that. I really liked the way that she conducted that meeting, and everybody knows that I'm going to be the first one to be critical of anybody or anything. So when I see somebody do something good, I want to also make sure that I say, hey, I really like how you're handling that. And so if any of you aldermen have a chance to catch one of those meetings, or mayor, I will tell you that it did show me a little bit of how things are being run on a day-to-day basis, and gave me some insight onto some of the good work that Ms. Moody is doing. With that said, I am a big proponent of transparency and accountability. And I do think that it's important that we are transparent in the day-to-day operations, and we are transparent as aldermen, and that the complaints are transparent, and that the people understand that we work for you, and that we're doing everything that we can to support Ms. Moody and to support our department heads in doing what they need to do. So with that said, I've had a couple of meetings, one with yourself and Ms. Moody, one with Ms. Moody, and one with Mr. Worsham over the past several weeks to talk about evaluations. Not necessarily our department head evaluations, those are being done on a yearly basis, but evaluations for our city administrator and our evaluations also for Mr. Worsham, our city attorney. I feel like it's a good measurement tool to also give them some accolades and to say, hey, here's what you're doing right, keep up the good work, and here's where we think that you should improve upon. I've spoke to the lady from MTAS about getting us some examples of those, so hopefully that'll be coming down the pipeline for us to discuss those in the future. I also had a meeting with some cool things. We looked at the overall plan for Johnson Lane and Wagner, thank you, with Mr. Glick and J.P. Kraft and citizen Jerry Harris, who has brought an idea about some really cool things to do out there. And I'm not sure if it's quite the time to express that, exactly what that is, but I learned a lot at that meeting about some of the plans and how those are being developed and was very impressed. My response about the COVID situation, guys, is just do not let fear run your life. And I will agree with Mr. Blanks, COVID is not going away, just like the flu will never go away. COVID will never go away. It's got a 99.9% survival rates. And I want to encourage our city and our governor, as just a little bitty old alderman in Tullahoma, Tennessee, to follow the lead of South Dakota, Florida, and Mississippi and deregulating some of this COVID stuff. We've got to move on. We've got to let our businesses move on. And, you know, with more testing comes higher numbers. So I wouldn't let that alarm our public too much. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Let me, first off, just pick up on COVID situation. Since our last meeting, I've had 4 personal friends that have been diagnosed positive with COVID. So it's touching home with a lot of people. I also attended the school board meeting last 2 weeks ago, and also the planning commission. So we had common interests there. Alderman Blackwell. Also did a Boy Scout session with a couple of young scouts who were doing their merit badge thing. We met here and talked about things with civic organizations and how government works primarily. So that was a good opportunity. But some of the things that I have been discussing with each of you as aldermen, the appointments for assignment, the appointments to various boards. So if you pass those down that way, Dr. Blanks, and if you pass those down that way, for the public, I'll just go down the list of where everyone will be serving this year. And these are not surprises to any of you because I have discussed them with each of you already. Alderman Blackwell has been serving on the Board of Education, and I'd like for you to continue on that board, Ms. Blackwell.
Okay.
And that's a pretty full assignment in that respect. Alderman Berry, I've got you've already mentioned your work on the Consolidated Communications Committee, and with that, I'd like for you to also continue on the Industrial Board. You've also mentioned the Sports Council, and by the way, I've been speaking with them as well about some activities that they want to do with youth sports in town. So thank you for continuing to work there. Ms. McGee, I've spoken with you about some activities that I think you will be interested in supporting. One's the Housing Authority. Thank you for serving in that respect. You also serve on the hospital as your admissions officer there. And I think you could add something to our Tullahoma Industrial Board because that's an important ingredient of our industrial act of our Tullahoma Economic Development community is the hospital. And going along with the Tullahoma Industrial Board, there is well, first off, I'm assigning you to the Tullahoma Area Economic Development Commission.
Okay.
And associated with that board is the Tullahoma Industrial Board. That's a relatively inactive board. They're holding some bonds that we currently have, so you'll be on those. Ms. Amacher, you have expressed an interest in some things that have to do with tourism, and I think that you're off to a good start there, and thank you for taking it down. That's a good job that you've gotten started there. So with that, I'd like for you to continue with the Tourism Council and also serve on the tree board. If you'd serve there, I'd be greatly appreciative. Alderman Dunn, you've expressed an interest in the Downtown Council, and you are already working with Go Green Tullahoma. I'd like for you to continue on those boards. Dr. Blanks, you're currently serving on the Tullahoma well, I'll find you here in a minute. Tullahoma Utilities Authority.
That's it.
Would you like to continue there?
Yes, sir.
We'd like for you to continue there.
Continue to serve.
You're also serving on the Arts Council. You've already mentioned that tonight. I'd like for you to continue there if you would, please. And on the Airport Authority, I have been there on the Airport Authority for some time and am very active in the activities associated with the board, with the airport particularly. So I'll be continuing on the airport, and will be representing the mayor's office on the Planning Commission. So those will be the activities that we're all working on. We've already elected Alderman Blackwell to serve on the Planning Commission as a member from the commission, from the Board of Mayor and Alderman. So that fills the slot for the mayor's appointments. So I know everyone will be bringing reports back from those meetings, and let me tell you that how much I appreciate the work that you do on these respective committees. This time we'll have a report from our city attorney. Attorney Worsham.
Thank you. As you all heard, we're continuing to work on the delinquent property tax suit issues. We have a number of properties, I can't remember the number, about 100 of them. We're going back to 2013 and moving forward with those matters. We have all of the service papers ready to be served with process after they're processed by the clerk and master here in Coffee County. We've already taken care of the Franklin County properties, and they've been served. We anticipate it'll be another month before she can issue all those, and then we've made arrangements to have a process server to serve those at a very reduced cost to the city. And I think it'll save the city a good deal of money. We don't know when the sale will be held yet, but I've been talking with the county tax attorney about that. We're working with them on some title searches and things like that to try to work hand in glove to minimize the amount of time that we both have to spend and not duplicate efforts. In addition to that, I'm working on the memorandum of understanding with the Markham family and the contractors who are building our new police station, the Markhams allowing us to utilize their property across the street for parking, and the trailer there that the contractors are using. We're going to have a memorandum of understanding. Ms. Moody's made those arrangements. We and the contractors have agreed to bear the cost of the property taxes on that property for the owners of the property, which is a very, very good bargain for us to be able to utilize that property for as long as we are. In addition to that, I'm just going to make a comment about the code thing. Do you think maybe we could have some hand sanitizers maybe in here in the room? We've got some there good. I still shake hands. I don't mean to, and I think a lot of people do. We're just so used to doing that. Might be a good idea if we had that, maybe some dispensers or something here for people in the crowd to have an opportunity to use that. Do y'all have any questions about anything?
Thank you very much. Hand sanitizers there by Chief Williams.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to get some right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney Worsham. Report from our city administrator, Ms. Moody.
Yes. I wanted to share with the board that I received a very nice a handwritten thank you note on our behalf from Dr. Stevens and Tullahoma City Schools, thanking us for the use of the CD Stamps Community Center for the Distance Learning Center. I also wanted to share for the public at home and for you that may not know, we have an employee safety and wellness committee. And each year, one of the things that they do for us is coordinate a 6-week employee wellness challenge. And we're in that 6-week period right now. You'll frequently see a lot more employees stop by and visit our community centers and take kind of a renewed interest in their health and wellness. And I wanted to invite each of you, if you're available, we're going to have a group walk at 4:30 on October 1st, meeting at the trailhead next to the library on Collins Street. This past Friday, Winston Brooks and I gave a presentation to the Noon Rotary Club, and I wanted to share again for the public's benefit. One of the items that we were able to share with the Rotary Club, it was a general presentation, sort of state of the city. One of the things that we shared though was the financial status and soundness of our city. And just reminding everyone, we are a AA2 rated community by Moody's. We have had excellent financial leadership, over 20 years of excellence in financial reporting and distinguished budget awards from the Government Finance Officers Association. And then we also shared that in response to COVID, very early, back in February, March of this year, we took some quick actions to protect the city's budget and the city's reserves. And I think you'll remember that when we started planning for the current year budget year, which starts July 1, we talked a lot about making sure that we ended the fiscal year 2020 without a large use of reserves, because we didn't know what was coming. We didn't know how long a recession may impact Tullahoma. And we wanted to make sure that we had sufficient reserves for this calendar year. We have been so fortunate in Tullahoma that we have continued to have year-over-year growth in sales tax every single month. And as you'll see in the financial report that was in this evening's packet, not only did we close the fiscal year 2020 without a use of reserves, we added $330,000 to our reserves. And so that is what allows us this year to continue to bring forward capital projects and paving like we're gonna see tonight, and purchases of equipment for our departments. And so I just wanted to brag on the very strong financial guidance that we get from our finance director, Sue Wilson, and her staff, and thank all of you for your leadership, and thank the leadership team for the sacrifices that they made that are certainly carrying us through a very strong financial position, something that many are not having at this time. So very proud of them. And then I will share a couple more things. We recently, the police department offered positions to 5 new police officers, and they will be starting with our department over the next 3 weeks. We also, beginning on Monday, September 21st, our patrol officers transition to 12-hour shifts. That's something that it's been asked for within the department, I would say, for many years, and it's something that puts us in a competitive position compared with all of the law enforcement agencies in this region, because we were really standing alone as the only law enforcement agency not on 12-hour shift schedule. We're hoping it will help us certainly with more recruitment. And then I will mention to you, for Tullahoma, unemployment statistics recently came out, and back in April, we had a peak of unemployment at 19.8%. Just within a few short months in August, the numbers released were at 7% unemployment. So you can see that we've recovered really quickly. And then last, I will just share that I was recently elected to the Tullahoma Arts Council board and will be participating in my first board meeting this Friday. And just want to share with the public in terms of any conflict of interest. It's the nonprofit agencies are the one part of our budget that I do not have discretion or do not make a recommendation on. So I just wanted to share that I feel like that's important that you all and the citizens know there's not a conflict of interest for me serving on that board. Okay, thank you. That's all that I have.
Thank you, Ms. Moody, and to recognize Ms. Wilson, she's doing double duty as our city recorder tonight. Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Yes.
Lady of many talents. Okay, we'll go into the consent agenda now. And the first is, as we hear every week, we are obliged to make this acknowledgement that all matters listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or a citizen so requests, and in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and be considered separate. During the portion of the meeting reserved for comments from citizens, as shown on the agenda, a citizen may request that the board remove that item from the consent agenda so the discussion may be held on that item. Before we take the motion on that consent agenda, let me acknowledge that Alderman Blackwell has requested that her vote for the Alderman position last meeting be changed. Is there any objection to Alderman Blackwell voting in the affirmative for that Alderman vote?
I object.
You object? Then we will take that motion. We will take the consent agenda from the minutes from the consent agenda, and we will have that as a separate item to be voted on in new business. Okay, with the removal of the item number 2090, we will consider the rest of the items. Item number 2091 is the financial report for June. Item 2092 is to accept a Tennessee Highway State Safety Grant of $15,000 for the Tullahoma Department and to authorize the mayor to sign the related grant document. 2093 is to ratify approval of a TDOT roadway maintenance project in the amount of $115,000 under statewide contract with Tinsley Asphalt LLC to repair and remove the repaved sections of highways in the city of Tullahoma. That was at State Route 130 and State Route 55. Item number 2094 is to accept the mayor's reappointment of Mr. Mylon Hill Jr. to the board Tullahoma Housing Authority for a 5-year term ending October 31st, 2025. Mr. Hill has consented to continue in that position. He's chairman of that board. Item number 2095, to approve the appointment of Mr. David Bond and Mr. Eugene London Jr. to the board of Tullahoma Area Economic Development Corporation for a 6-year term ending July 26, 2026. That also those two gentlemen have consented to continue their appointment on that board. So I'll accept an appointment to approve the consent agenda with the removal of item 2091.
Motion approved.
Second.
Motion from Dr. Blanks to approve, second by Alderman Blackwell. All in favor? Aye. And we have a 7-0. Okay. Under old business, as we discussed in the public hearing earlier today on ordinance number 1544, we have an ordinance to amend the zoning map of Tullahoma, Tennessee as set forth in the municipal code, which is an ordinance 1392 to rezone an approximately 6/10 of an acre parcels at 713, 715, 717 on East Lincoln Street, and from the general C2 general commercial to district to R3 high density residential district. Is there a motion to approve?
Move
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve the rezoning ordinance. Is there a second?
Second.
Have a second to approve that rezoning ordinance. It's been for the planning commission. It's passed already on the first reading here. So all in favor, vote in affirmative. Passes 7-0. Under new business, item number 2096 is to approve an improvement project with Tullahoma Disc Golf Association and Tullahoma Sunrise Rotary Club to authorize the acceptance of community donations and in-kind services to support the addition of a new 9-hole course to the Sunrise Rotary Disc Golf Course. This is over by East Lincoln and it's a very popular venue for those who play disc golf. This is you had it in your package, a more thorough discussion of this. So I'll accept the motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, got a motion from Alderman Dunn, second from Alderman Blackwell. Is there any discussion?
Mayor Nellis. May I recognize our Parks Director, Kirk Glick, to tell the public a little bit more about this community project?
Love to hear from our Parks Director, Mr. Glick. Love to talk about disc golf.
Well, the disc golf course has become very popular in Tullahoma, and actually on several of the websites that talk about disc golf, national websites, it's rated very highly for all aspects of it, the playability, the difficulty, and the way it's maintained. So we're very proud of that, and we're real proud of the disc golf community in Tullahoma, that disc golf association that comes together to help us out a whole lot in maintaining the course and having activities and events at the course. And a very active group. There's a group of them, I've seen them that come out there and play golf about every day. But some of the days they come out with weed eaters and throw their disc around and weed eat as they go. So very big help to us in taking nice care of it, and they take pride in it. So they came to me and wanted to make some improvements to the course in addition, and we looked at it. I got the original course designer, H.B. Clark, down, and he came and looked at it and said it would work out well, what we planned to add 9 holes. So he has a little preliminary design, but he has some work to do on it. We're waiting for approval first to go all out, but the disc golf group has already raised enough funds to get him started and pay him, and they're going to work with the Sunrise Rotary Club to raise additional funds. And I think the Rotary Club has plans to apply for a district grant that will kind of double their money. So it's all coming together nicely.
Very good, I appreciate that. I can tell you from, I know people who drive over 80 miles to come here on a regular basis to play our Rotary Disc Golf Course here in Tullahoma. Also, you might note that there's an arboretum there as well for many people who like to just walk the course and visit the arboretum that we have.
Yeah, that kind of makes it the arboretum accessible. The way the course is maintained and the fairways of the course makes it all the trees that are labeled out there very accessible to get to and walk and see what it's all about there.
Very good. Any questions for?
It's my understanding, right, that we've talked about the maintenance. There's no additional maintenance to this, right?
It'll be slightly different.
We're already taking
the
care of
area,
that.
yeah, we're already taking care of the area as a whole, and where the additional 9 holes will be built, there are some kind of walking trails out in that area that we are currently maintaining. So we may widen them out a little bit, so it'll be slightly more to maintain, but not much. And with the help of the disc golf people, and we get them up in that area as well, they'll help us out.
Makes it worth maintaining since we're already doing it.
Yeah, it is. It will be negligible, the amount of effort additional to us.
Awesome. Great work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Glick, Alderman Almacher, this is another tourism activity that we have in Tullahoma that's we're quite proud of. Is there any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please vote in the affirmative. 6-1.
Can I change my vote? It was supposed to be.
If you can have that vote be recorded, we think we can do that.
Thank you.
Vote again.
Herb, that was a good move.
Thank you.
I wondered about that.
What's your problem?
Need my eyes checked.
Very, very good.
I know a guy.
Item number 2097 is to approve the list of streets for fall paving. On page 77 of your handout, you saw the agenda for street paving that's planned for this fall. Before there's any discussion on this, I'll get a motion on the table a motion to approve this list of street paving.
Move to approve.
Second.
Second by Dunn, second by Baydog, Dunn, approved, second by all blanks. Okay, on 77, you see the list of streets that are proposed for paving. And it's my understanding that this agenda item is for the $245,000, which normally we put about $250,000 into street paving for the fall. I think Ms. Moody will have another agenda item. We'll be discussing some additions to that. But for the street paving we are currently voting on, that's what's been repaved. Yes, I have had some questions from residents about other streets, but there is an agenda for deciding which streets get approved for repaving. And Mr. Taylor, would you care to address that process?
If I could, Mayor, with the board, I wanted to share some of my intention. These next three items on your agenda are somewhat interdependent. In putting them in this order, what I imagined you may want to do is consider approval of the annual paving list with the $250,000 that we already have budgeted. And then with the next item, I imagined discussing that governor's grant money, one-time use of money. That's where you might want to discuss additional funding for more paving. But they're linked, and so I just wanted to mention that to you. And then tonight, we have a PowerPoint to share with you. I shared it with you in advance, so I know you've had an opportunity to see it. But I thought for the public, many of them, we have our routes that we travel regularly, and we don't often wander off into other neighborhoods and onto other streets. And I think it would be helpful if they see some of this PowerPoint and see some of the criteria that we look at when we rank streets, and some of the condition of the roads in other parts of Tullahoma and why these are high-ranking streets. So I don't imagine us taking a lot of time, but it would be nice to go through the list of what we've recommended.
Okay, Mr. Taylor, would you care to do that for us?
Yes. As you can see on Ms. Moody's layout there, we have the first, if you look at that, there's probably 6 streets. There's probably 16 plus or minus segments.
18 roadway sections on these 6 streets.
Yeah, so $250,000, it's not like a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money. Okay. So if you put that into, you can look at it 2 ways. You can do it in streets, sections of streets. You can do it in other ways. You can do it street miles, lane miles. But still, $250,000 is $250,000. We make it work the best we can. As you can see up on the screen there, as I said, there's about 18 road sections along 6 streets: Sharondale, Cowan, Collins Street, North Anderson, Wiseman, and Huntington Place. If you guys have had time to look at that, go out and look at these streets, you'll see the condition they're in. They definitely all need work. Some folks think their streets are more important than others. Certainly understand that. We have a ranking system that we use to go through and rank the streets. We're currently re-ranking the streets now. I would say we're probably a third of the way through that. at this time. It's a lengthy process to rank the streets. I'll give you, for instance, the best time to look at streets is after rain and the road starts to dry. You can see the conditions. If you're riding the street, it seems smooth, but after you see it dry, you see the cracks, imperfections, delaminations, corrugations, you see all of those. So we try to look at those on rainy days. We try to re-rank the streets, as I said, for about every 3 to 4 years. If you constantly try to rank streets every year, you're constantly ranking them, and people on that list keep wondering why they're getting bumped off the list. So it, as you can see, I mean, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'll just intercede here. I know one of the aldermen had asked for a little more detail about the criteria. So if I can, I want to pass this out. This is a copy of the attachments from last year's annual paving. Let me give you And so this was a question that I received today. We weren't anticipating it, and that's why it's not in your packet. But if you look at page 3, this is an example from the spreadsheet and from the program where the ranking score is created. And so some of the criteria, you see at the top, length, width, number of lanes, material cost, an estimate on the tons of materials needed, and that's how we arrive at an estimated probable cost for the repairs. Then if you look below that, these are the criteria that we look at for the condition of the roadway. So patching, potholes, any rutting, the overall roughness or unevenness of the road, traffic volume, and it's ranked by the classification of the street. So that tells us how many citizens are regularly driving that road, drainage, alligatoring or cracking, other types of cracking along edges. And I'm sure Mr. Taylor will have to tell you more about the weighting of these criteria. I do know that very often when I've looked at roads, let's say I'll be inside of a neighborhood driving a more residential street that may have worse alligatoring or obvious patching or rutting, and then I'll wonder, well, why is their score so far down the list? And a lot of times I've noticed that it's traffic volume. So, you know, something like Cedar Lane, or I think in this past week, Mayor Noes asked me about West Lincoln Street. It may not appear as bad as some of our more neighborhood streets, but I think other factors are causing it to have a higher score. And that makes sense. More of our citizens are driving on those high traffic volume streets, and they rank a little bit higher. You have anything you want to add?
No, there is, Wayne Limbaugh, myself, and Scott St. John, several years back, we kind of developed this ranking system, I guess somewhat with activity out of it, I guess. And you go out there, you look at the street. Sometimes you have to go up and down that street 3 or 4 times to get the full feel of the street. But we did this thing, we put it together, we thought it was the most fair way to do it. And you put the numbers in, or you put the boxes, you just tick a box. And once at the end you get through, there's about 4 sheets to this actual program that Wayne created. And anybody that's an Excel expert can get into the if statements and all that. Wayne took a long time putting this thing together. And what we do, we go in the formula, we just tick a box. If patching and potholes, if it's a high number, we just put a box. We put an X in that box. At the end, it scores it. We look at the end. In this case, this particular street was 580. So all those boxes together with the weighted scores of, like Ms. Moody said, traffic volume, percentage of how much alligatoring, sprawling, delamination, all those factors play into that, and at the end, that number kicks out. It's not a number that I put in or my staff puts in. That number is kicked out by us ticking the box.
Yes, and then I shared with you that if you look at page 4, for instance, I shared with you that the rankings, they are very time consuming. They take many months for them to drive all of the streets, enter this information into their database, and come out with the rankings. And so we only do that about every 2 years. We're still working, the recommendations tonight are still working off of the same rankings that you were making decisions on last year. So I just am providing this again so that you can see, if you remember last year, it does seem like 600 is about the highest score that we see. Last year, we looked at Cedar Lane. And if we had repaved Cedar Lane, we had about $450,000 last year to do paving. It would have taken the entire budget. And so we made a decision to recommend patching of Cedar Lane, defer repavement until the next time that the city borrows money. And that's what we've done. We've repaired it and patched it. What that allowed us to do is use that $450,000 on the neighborhood streets that are in that next block, the scores in the 560 range. And now this year, if you look right below that, most of the streets that we're recommending this year are in that next tier because we completed these other streets in the spring of 2020.
There are other things that play in, factors, the weather, the rain, the rainy season we've had. We don't know what this winter will bring. Some of these roads that, I'm not sure, one of the board members said this was probably a month ago about the actual pavement is moving underneath. That is correct. I mean, you see that out there. A lot of those we may have to go in and dig up and build those back from the base up. So there's a lot of factors. The freeze thaw, it all has a factor in it. If we, like I said, you could do this and rank the streets every year. It's a lengthy, time-consuming process. But again, every year the weather can play a part in changing the condition of the road.
Yeah, and so as he said, he's been working for about 2 months now on starting. They've spent about 2 months re-ranking some streets, and they'll continue for several more months finishing out re-ranking so that by spring we'll have a new list and new recommendations, a fresh look at it.
That is the hopes of have everything at least ready for the spring. If there's money there available, great. If not, going into our next fiscal budget, we'll have all those streets re-ranked and everything can be seen from that standpoint, work our way down the list.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Alderman, have any questions for Mr.?
Yes, ma'am.
I had one question, and I was the one who asked Ms. Moody this question earlier, and the reason why is that I remembered from last year the system, and my question was, is there a way to ensure, so one of the things that I look at when I'm looking at the street, this page 3, so, is that there's no, like, yes, this has been, like, there's no indicator of when the last time it was paved, if that makes sense. So is there a way to...
You're correct, and that's something we're starting to do now is keep up with the dates the streets were paved and kind of get a judgment going forward of how long the streets are lasting. Are they lasting particularly longer in this area or that area? And that tells a little bit about movement patterns of what's going on in the city. So we haven't done that in the past, but we're starting to keep up with it.
Yeah, that would be a good practice. I will share generally an overlay is going to last about 5 to 7 years, and a milling and repaving should last us 20 to 25 years.
And my question was, is if we're using this this specific, for lack of actuarial equation type thing, right? So, are there going to be places that have not been touched in a long time because they're getting bumped back down? And I worry that that's something that our citizens...
That can happen, as I said, if you start doing this, trying to rank them every 3 years instead of 3, maybe even 5 years, that can happen due to weather conditions. Things can happen, can cause streets to get bumped down the list.
So,
go ahead.
Is there a way, I think that's a very good point, is there a way to add that into part of the equation as how long it's been since? I think that would be
a very
good tool.
it wouldn't be me, but it would be somebody that understands the spreadsheet, because like I said, Mr. Limbaugh created this. I only help with, I guess, the technical parts of how to calculate asphalt and all that. Mr. Limbaugh spent a lot of time putting those weights in there, but if anybody that is.
Yeah, I think all it would be is another criteria. Just like you said, you've got to put in something for age of roadway. And if it exceeds a certain number, we could decide 20 years, 25 years.
Like it's a higher rank.
Then it's
than-
automatically in the list.
Yeah, a higher
Because-
rank for that, and then, 10 years would be one score, 5 years another score.
And
Yeah.
to add a little bit to that, prior to 1995, 97, I'm going back a ways, our streets did not have what we call a base binder underneath. They were just gravel and asphalt put over the top. Since the mid-90s, somewhere in there, we changed that to what we call a 8-2, 1.5. It's 8 inches of base stone, 2 inches of base binder, and 1.5 inches of topping, which has helped. But a lot of these subdivisions, older subdivisions, and
So it's lasting longer,
Yep.
is what you're telling
so,
me? Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
I mean, we changed that, but we still have a lot of streets that were built
Sure.
under that.
Sure.
So those are coming to show up now.
You only do what you can do.
Okay, any further questions for Mr. Taylor? Now we have a motion, a second, and, ask for all in favor to vote in the affirmative.
Can we restate, so we're,
Do you want me to take a minute and go through the streets, or do we not want to do that?
What's on page 77 on the $250,000, and that, the rest of it comes up under the next agenda item, I believe.
Are these the streets that we're voting on? These?
Yes, the 18 segments of these 6 roads.
Are we going through the PowerPoint still?
$250,000.
are there still more on the PowerPoint?
There's more, if you want me to run through
Can
those
we
pretty
finish?
quickly.
Yeah, do it real
Yeah.
quick.
Okay.
Like to-
So Wiseman Road,
As you can see on Wiseman Road there, it ranks high. If you see all sorts of these items that's on this, that gets weighted. You got delamination, you've got alligatoring, you've got rutting, sprawling. I mean, I couldn't take pictures of all the whole street. If I did, it'd be lengthy. But you've got this condition on all, that whole street.
and then Cowan Lane.
Cowan, as you can see in the background, that's some of the paving we did last year. And I guess you tell me when I'm getting too long here. If we back up a ways, several years back, we presented a packet to the board. Most of you guys probably weren't here at the time, Alderman Blanks maybe. They had subdivisions, had a group of subdivisions in there that we were trying to pave as we go forward. In that group that we had, I think out of probably 6 subdivisions, maybe 7, 3 got the money to get paid. But,
I'm sure you've received calls, because I've received calls about Sharondale. We paved Sharondale Drive, and we're coming back now and finishing the subdivision. We didn't have enough funding in one round of paving to pave the entire subdivision, and so we're coming back with the next
Sharondale was
phase.
one of those that was in that little booklet that Wayne Limbaugh and myself put together, and that's been several years back, so we're just now getting to that point. That is Cowan Lane, it's in Sharondale. These are short little sections in between. As you can see, delaminating and potholing, alligatoring. You see all the above right there in that particular slide.
Yep. And then finishing Sharondale Drive itself, which is a loop.
Okay, that's Huntington Place. As you can see, this is a subdivision that does not have base binder underneath it. It just has topping. So you can see all the alligatoring, you see some delamination, you see all kinds of sprawling, longitudinal, transverse cracking. You can see it. So.
Interesting. Okay, here's another Anderson Street.
This is Anderson Street right at the intersection of Hogan, going north, I guess, if you will. As you can see, all the above is there, rutting, terrible rutting there. You see some of the mud actually coming back through the road there in the road edge. Another part of Anderson Street, another angle of seeing the rutting. South Collins, that's right down by the bank, down below the hill. See delamination, all the above.
Okay. And then I'll just share like I was saying, I think in the next agenda item, you're gonna have some money to allocate. I've made a recommendation about allocating it, but I also wanted you to have this additional information. What I'm recommending is that we fund all of the streets mentioned with the $250,000 that's currently budgeted, and then allocate an additional $100,000 to paving to do this list of streets: Somerset Lane, Aldrin Street, and Country Club Drive. And then allocate another $38,000 for West Grundy Street. We paved West Grundy Street on the other side of Jackson, but now with the completion of the new police department headquarters, I think it was already somewhat deteriorating, but the construction traffic over top of it has really made it very noticeable. And as our new project is complete, it will look like a patch and probably show against a brand new parking lot, brand new building. So I thought if we could carve out a little bit of money to pave from where the current crosswalk is down the hill to the start of the bridge, 38,000 should be a good number to get that done.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I think that background gives you a good handle on both these items. And next item is 2098, and it goes to, first off, we'll be voting on 2097 for the $250,000. That's what we have a motion on the floor for at this point in time, and a motion that's been seconded. Any further discussion? Not all vote affirmative.
Oh, you know. She can see it.
Okay, and next is the 2098, which is, we will also now get a motion on the table for the approval of the allocation of the governor's local government support grant funds in the amount of $457,466 to support one-time projects and expenditures for FY 2021. We'll first get a motion on the floor.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve from Alderman Dunn. Second from Alderman Blanks. And I'll defer to Ms. Moody for further discussion on the allocation of those funds.
I'll just ask, does anyone have any questions?
I just had one question, and that was, I think I emailed it to you regarding, just because when I put it out there to people that this was what we were voting on, the question around Cedar Lane and sidewalks, and whether, and I was like, I know that that's moving forward, but I can't remember where we were at, and I wanted to just get that clarification as to why it's not on this list.
Yes, so the city has surface transportation dollars that come to us from the state, and that is when citizens pay their gas tax, portions of that are allocated back to us for road projects. I didn't include those TDOT road projects on this list, but that project is still underway. It's either in NEPA or design phase. Okay, so NEPA is the environmental review phase, and typically can take up to 2 years. We're 1 year into that process.
Is that NEPA?
Yes.
Okay.
Make sure you
Kind of
don't
like-
have bats or smell bars.
Yes. Okay, great. That was,
Be
that
effective.
was my question.
That's correct.
You've seen the list of the projects that Ms. Moody has, how the allocation of those dollars from the state. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that?
Yeah, I have some.
Not?
I do. I have some.
Oh, excuse me.
First one's just kind of a silly question. I love seeing the digital radios in here because they're coming up. I'm sorry, Chief. Why is fire 20 and TPD 10?
Well, good question. So when the radio purchases were presented to me, and Chief Shastine, our fire department, I think is very good about this being judicious and thinking about our limited resources, he'll often ask me for a multi-year plan. He'll say, you know, I know we need to replace radios, but rather than ask for every radio to be funded in 1 year, he'll spread it over 3 years. That's what we did, and that was the plan. However, when Chief Williams was hired, he found additional, I don't know if you used your drug fund money, you did. So he found additional money in the drug fund and purchased year 1 and year 2 last year in radios. So he's off to a better start, I guess you could say.
That wasn't saying one needed before the other, I was wondering why. Cameras, what kind of cameras are these? Like snap cameras,
No.
body cams?
Body cams.
Okay.
Yes, we would like to have body cameras on our
Absolutely.
police officers, on our animal control officers, and on our building inspectors.
Awesome.
And yeah, I can say more if you want me to, but
One last, I personally would rather see us throw in that extra $200,000 for, or as close as we can get. I would rather spend more money on roads than taking the 150 that we've already. And I understand that that would let us use that money from something else, but rather than, this is kind of like bonus money. We need roads. And being full disclosure, I know that one of these roads is terrible. And I almost thought sending a bill to the city because I've hit it and blocked my tire and bent my wheel on one of the things in there. But those are the Lincoln, West Lincoln, and the Linda Lane in that area, which I see on this list. Based in short, I would rather see us pull back some of that 150 and put it towards roads.
right. So that would take an additional $100,000. That was something I explained, I think if you saw your email today, the option that says additional 200,000, that's assuming you approve the 100,000 list and had an additional 100,000 to do Linda Lane and those other streets.
So I would
One of the
propose-
options, which on the list of recommended projects, would you recommend foregoing the Avoca Road Riley Creek project, or are you proposing you're saying use
I
all
would
of
say let's take
the,
100 from the garbage truck replacement and leave that at 50. I wouldn't want to touch the Avoca Road, Riley Creek.
okay,
And I realize that that would take away from some of these other, a lot of these other projects on the other page. But like Butch kind of said, he only can work with what he's got. And I know that some of the equipment in there, but man, we really, $250,000, even with the extra 100,000 for roads just isn't cutting it.
okay. That would be good to have some more discussion, everyone.
How are we, okay, I need a little more information on the garbage truck replacement. If I could hear from,
Sure.
you can recognize Butch.
Yeah, that's something I didn't provide, Butch, was anything about how many garbage trucks you have, the age of them, any of that?
We have 6 frontline garbage trucks. 2 residential automated, you see the arm picks up the residential cans. We have 2 commercial trucks, they do double duty. They do recycle, cardboard, they also do commercial garbage pickup. So if we have to just about replace a garbage truck every other year. The lifespan of those, especially the residential trucks, they're not long. We probably dump 1,250 plus or minus cans a day per each truck. So we're looking at about 3,000. If you count that double, that's 6,000 up and downs with that truck. So yeah, I mean, they're not cheap, and the residentials definitely don't last long. Our rear loading trucks that you see for cardboard, they last a little bit longer. They don't have all the moving parts that the other trucks. You get into your dumpster trucks, you see the arms that pick up the big green dumpsters, up and down, up and down. So they just don't last.
We've already approved the money for this new truck, right? So he
We
already has that.
anticipated this replacement need, and so in our vehicle and equipment replacement fund, we do have $300,000 set aside to buy the garbage truck. What I was proposing was one way or the other, using grant funds or only using half of that that's in the reserve fund to free up money to fund some of these other department requests.
I will say this, we keep backup trucks, as bad as I hate to say, and I hate to ever have to go to a backup truck, but you like to think those are good to go, but they're generally worn out already. And you're lucky if you get to take one out and make it through a half of a route before it breaks down. So it's a constant maintenance. It's constant maintenance.
Am I understanding, I think this is, I should, based on our last study session, ask Alderman Noes. Am I understanding Alderman Berry's request about taking $100,000? It isn't from the truck itself, it's from the $60,000 flatbed dump truck, new extrication equipment for fire, right? That's where.
Page
No.
79.
Yeah,
So
on page 80 though, is
no,
where the
it's-
list is that the under 50.
On 79, it's taken the $150,000 out of
Correct. And
grant, which would,
on
you'd have to
80.
move around what you do here.
Yeah,
Yes,
it-
that's my question, is it?
It would not eliminate our ability to buy the garbage truck.
Right.
What he's saying is we would use $100,000 of that and put it towards paving and maybe still have $50,000 that we could free up in the vehicle and equipment replacement fund.
But so on page 80, those list, if I'm correct, that's where the $100,000 that will come out of, really. Like, not really, but that's where we would
No.
lose the things that we
No.
purchased.
Yeah, you would not be able to purchase those at this time.
That's
the way
my
I would
question.
say it.
100,000 of that you would.
Yeah, 100,000, so 50,000 of that we would.
And I will just say again that this is an unusual year where obviously when we passed the budget, we knew that it was a very restrictive budget. The only purchases that we accounted for were this garbage truck replacement, a mini excavator for Public Works, which helps them to do sidewalk projects, and 2 trucks for Parks and Recreation. And we knew that we would probably replace 2 or 3 patrol vehicles. That's it. That's all that's in the budget for capital. So I would still say those were our top priorities, and that's why we made sure those things were in the budget. Now we're having the opportunity to come back and with this one-time allocation of funding, appropriate it to those next priorities. I think you'll have another opportunity. I've told you we're only 2 months in to the budget year. We are already up 6% on our sales tax. We'll probably have another opportunity to come back and fund some things. So, I mean, I don't want it to be overly dramatic tonight that if one of these items isn't funded, that it means we're waiting all the way to next July. We're most likely waiting till the end of the calendar year or something like that to come back.
I guess my kind of thing is we always sit here and say, we'll put more money into roads or sidewalks. So let's do that now, and then say, well, if we have extra money, we'll come back and get, not that you don't need a new flatbed, and you don't need extra, I'm not saying that we don't need those things, but instead, let's for once say, my suggestion is, let's for once say, hey, we're gonna do roads first. And then if we have chance, opportunity at the end of the year, we come back and say, okay, now let's get some of these nice to haves. Would be mine.
I think Alderman Berry's onto something as far as being able to prioritize the needs versus the wants right now. And I think that I'm with him on that roads are a priority at this point. If you drive, through Tullahoma right now, we have many more roads that are just on this short list that could definitely use some TLC. And I think that needs to come first as well.
Okay, we have a motion on the board with a second. We can vote on that motion, and then we can get a new motion on the floor to make a change.
We can amend the motion now. I like to make, amend. I'd like to amend the motion to take $100,000 from the half garbage truck replacement and add it to roads. We'll get the full 200, that full list. Right.
And 100,000 to it.
And add 100,000 to street paving.
Do we then have to, oh, sorry.
You have to vote on the motion to amend or discuss it.
You got an amendment on the
We've
floor,
got-
we need a second.
I
Got an
second.
amendment on the floor, we need a second.
I second.
And a second. And we'll discuss that amendment additionally if anyone chooses.
My question is, if we have this amendment on the floor with the second, does that mean when we go to vote again, does that mean we need to go back to, once again, to page 80? Where we need to then pull the, like, decide of that 150,000 that was proposed originally, like where that's, what we're not gonna utilize, what the $50,000 that's left would go toward, or that, if, because the $50,000 will still go to the truck, and then that $50,000 here. Do you see what I'm asking? Does that make any sense?
The $100,000 out of that line item will go to the road repair and $50,000 to go to the garbage truck.
And then that extra $50,000 on page 80 then, that's still left over, right? So would we have to then discuss where that $50,000 goes?
I don't think this tells us that. These are just ideas, right?
Those are my
Yeah.
recommendations for what we do with the 150. If you tell me that there's only 50, then I would just come with a new recommendation.
You would just come with a new
Yeah.
recommendation. We don't have to figure that out now.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, with that discussion, we can vote on the amendment at this point.
Just the,
Vote on the amendment is 4 in favor of the amendment and 3 against the amendment. So the amendment passes.
I don't think
The
I
amended motion.
I don't think I understood that one then. Sorry. Can I amend mine to the green? Because I thought that I was voting. Does that make sense? Like I thought I was voting not no for the
Daniel's amendment is to take $100,000 off of that extra money and put that towards extra roads.
Okay.
That'll leave 50 for Miss Moody to decide how she wants to allocate the rest of it towards a flatbed dump truck, new extrication equipment, or whatever.
Okay, I think I misunderstood, but that's fine.
You misunderstood?
Yes, I
Do you wish to change your vote?
to green. Yes, please.
You do wish to change your
Yes.
vote? We'll have a revote and with Alderman Onwalker.
Sorry about that.
Excuse me, Alderman Blanks. Alderman Blackwell wishes to revote. Okay, all in favor? Yes, or opposed?
Okay, that makes more sense.
So it's now 5 in favor and 2 against, so the amendment passes. The amended motion passes with those changes.
Okay.
Okay. Moving right along. Item number 2099, to approve the purchase and replacement of 1 garbage truck.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
In a second. Any further discussion on that issue? No. Let's all vote to, for and is against. Vote. 7-0 in favor. Is there any other new business come before the board this evening?
The minutes.
We do have the amendment.
Motion to adjourn.
Consent, the minutes from the previous meeting. The item number 2091 was the minutes in which Alderman Blackwell had voted negative, and she wishes to change her vote, and we will have that revote at this time. And that revote.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to object to a revote. In our Robert's Rules meeting earlier today, if any person objected to that, then that cannot be changed. It is on the record, and it cannot be revoted on just to change her vote.
Then I guess, but did she say that I could put in a letter?
Put a letter.
You could put a letter.
Okay.
You can put in a
Yes.
And I can do that.
Yeah, that'd be the correct way to do that.
But you do need to adopt the minutes.
Yes.
Is there any other new business?
Make a motion to adopt the.
We have, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
We gotta adopt
We
it.
have to approve the minutes still.
We gotta approve the minutes.
Yeah, you
Make a
removed the
motion.
minutes from the
We've got
consent
to do
agenda,
the
so you still
consent
need to.
agenda. Thank you for keeping me straight, all of you. Okay, all in favor of the consent agenda with the item on number 1 that was excluded, please vote at this time.
He said with the one that was excluded.
Didn't we already vote on the consent agenda? We already
You
voted, so we
did, you're
just need to do
voting on
the.
item 20.
Just the
Yeah,
item.
we just need to
Just the
vote
item.
on.
The minutes.
I make a motion to approve item 2090.
Second.
A second. Late.
7-0.
I make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Vote yes. Okay. We will now convene the beer board. The consent agenda for the beer board is the minutes from the September 14th. You've read those minutes. Any comments or motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Move to approve. All in favor, vote, please, vote.
Just one item.
Any other old business?
Did you vote?
I did.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And we still have,
Study session.
7-0. Any other old business?
Mr. Mayor, just pointed out to us that we voted on the amendment to item 2098. We didn't vote on item 29 as 2098 as amended.
oh.
Thank you.
Yes.
We need to reopen, ladies from Tullahoma News just pointed out.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we vote on item 2098 as amended.
Thank you, Alderman Berry.
I'll second it.
Alderman Berry's motion is to vote on item 2098 and seconded by Alderman Blackwell. All in favor?
Thank you. I'll tell our city recorder this is what happens when she's
Thank you. Thank you.
We can adjourn now. Unless there's anything else.
Any other new business on the beer board?
Motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn has been made. A second.
Second.
We are adjourned. And that concludes our formal agenda for this evening on the study. And now we have a board study session. And we will adjourn the beer board and go into the study session. The study session is, we've designated the study session to only cover one topic, and that's the discussion on the Wall Street Alley and the proposed lease. Background, Administrator Moody.
Well, before we begin, if you would like, our city attorney can give kind of a status report on where we are with the lease negotiations.
If you would, please.
I'm not exactly sure when this endeavor began, but in the spring, we received a request from London's, the restaurant over on West Lincoln Street, for an opportunity to be able to serve alcoholic beverages in the park property that they own just east of the Wall Street Alley, adjacent to their business building there. And we attempted to help them devise a plan whereby they could do that, because they were going to have to cross Wall Street in order to get to that, and they wanted to utilize Wall Street as a means of ingress and egress to their park property. And so Ms. Moody and I discussed how we might could do that, and we discussed that possibly a lease agreement between the city and them, a non-exclusive lease, which would then create an ownership interest in behalf of Linden's toward that property as a tenant, of course, not as an owner, that would then allow us to give them the permits necessary for them to carry on their business in the park-like property. We've been working on that agreement for a number of months, and negotiating with them via their attorney. And I prepared a lease agreement initially. They took it under advisement. They looked at it for quite some time. There's been some other discussions. In the meantime, Ms. Moody decided that the best way to allow them to open when they wanted to before the lease was actually formalized was to give them a special events permit. And she did that, and that was a way whereby they could open and begin operating. And they did construct a fence there and planted some shrubbery and things there to make that more, more useful to them and give them a little privacy and whatever. We finally got the lease agreement back from their attorney not long ago with some changes in it that created some problems for us. And right now we want the board to look at the lease. Mr. Berry, I think, is the first one that brought it up some time ago about wanting to review it before we finalize it. At this point, I think we're at a point where we want to decide, do we want to even move forward with this agreement or not, because there have been some problems that have arisen that Ms. Moody will relate to you in just a moment about how they have operated there under the special events permit that they've been operating under for several months now. So I think we need to make sure that what they do there and the operation that they conduct there is compatible with our downtown area and the other business owners in the downtown area that can be impacted by that, as well as pedestrians using Wall Street and other things like that. We put provisions in the lease agreement allowing for pedestrian traffic, allowing for emergency vehicles and things of that nature, but in order to control crowds, they found they needed to utilize temporary barriers in order to be able to check the people coming in and out, check the ideas and things like that. Well, that's creating problems, I understand, for people that also want to use that alley just for the purpose of using an alley for transportation purposes. So that's where we are now. The lease agreement I think you have in your packet there to review is rather complicated. It's kind of a typical lease agreement when you're leasing property. Mr. Bell eliminated 2 or 3 things in his suggested revision of it that weren't material. A couple of them are. Ms. Allmacher and I have talked about it. She was concerned about the liability issues relative to that, and we do have an indemnification provision in the lease whereby they would indemnify the city for any damages that might occur there or any injuries or things of that nature. But we didn't have an insurance provision in there. After we talked, I thought we should have an insurance provision in there requiring them to provide insurance to fund that indemnification for us. And that's not been resolved yet because we're now at a point where we've received from them their requested changes for the lease, and we're not ready to finalize that yet until this board looks at it to see what we want to do. But Ms. Moody wants to discuss with you the problems that have arisen and her ideas about how we might want to address this. Sarah? Thank you.
I think I would just add that my primary reason for putting this on, or requesting that we have this study session, is that I've had a number of conversations with many of you individually about this issue, and I think everyone in our conversations brings a little bit of a different perspective or experience to the conversation, that it would be helpful if we all hear one another and our thoughts about it. There also seemed to be, when I started the negotiation and started working with London's and Mr. Keller, there was a clear consensus among the board members that we work with him on this vision that he has for improving the green space and for possibly using the alley as a part of that green space, making it contiguous. Over time, I feel like I'm not so sure anymore where the consensus of the board is. And so that would be helpful tonight if I hear, for instance, if there is a philosophical change that has happened where you are just opposed to the idea of closing the alley at all, that would be important for me to know. If there are conditions where you think it could be appropriate to close the alley, that would be helpful to know. One of the things I've done is reviewed back in 2016 when the board voted to put up the posts or the bollards that are in the alley, closing it to vehicular traffic. It was very clear from that meeting that the intent was to keep it open for pedestrians, and the bollards are there to prevent vehicular traffic to make it safe for pedestrians. So I think we have a recognition that there's a reason and a demand for pedestrians to be in that space, and we want to make it as safe as possible. I think where we're at today is that we're trying to find the best way to make it fair to all of the businesses in the downtown. We have a lot of work has gone into, especially in the last couple of years, a renewed focus on improving downtown and highlighting it as an entertainment district. And ideally, we'd like people to very easily be able to go from one restaurant or bar or retail shop to another. And so I think from the city staff perspective and everything we've learned from our Main Street education and the Tennessee Downtowns program that we've been participating in for 2 years, we want it to be safe, walkable, attractive, and to be viewed as a district as a whole. So that's where our intent, where we're coming from. I do always want to be very clear with you when I think things are not working, and we've gone through a lot of iterations. I'm glad that Joseph Keller is here tonight, so I don't want to speak for him. If you have questions for him, I think he's here so he can provide those answers. We both have stayed in pretty regular communication, Winston Brooks and Joe Keller and myself. And I think over time, the way things have evolved, there are a lot of improvements that have been made that are temporary, and they're not at all his vision for the property. These are temporary measures, but we are having some kind of serious issues come up. And one of the temporary solutions that we've come up with is the purchase of these barricades to control the crowds, to be able to make sure that we know alcohol isn't leaving or entering this space, and that we know that people who may be underage are being kept out of that space. But then we've had other property owners who are questioning whether that is something that the city should be doing. Should we be allowing the public alley to be closed for what appears to be benefiting one business and possibly at the detriment of other businesses, or the ability of their patrons to use the alley? So I just say, this is what happens. There's lots of good intent behind everything, but there's good and bad. There's issues being created.
I just know that when, in 2016, were you on the board then, Ray?
Yes. Yes.
Two of us were on the board. You may have approved it, I did not. I never did approve, closing the alley down. Probably still don't. I get the intent of trying to make that where it's safe, but, I said then and I'll say now, once we do something like this, it's very hard to go back and change it. You want to make it safe. I get the idea of barricading that off, but, you're doing it for one business downtown. You've got another business that's complaining now that it looks like we're giving him an unfair advantage. In reality, if we approve this lease, we are. So, I don't know. If we'd have never approved the Ballards to begin with, we probably wouldn't have this discussion.
I do know that we feel like one of the disadvantages of our downtown district is that we don't have public gathering spaces. We don't have a center plaza or, we have a park on the other side of the railroad tracks from the main downtown businesses. So we have really looked at the alleys as the potential gathering space for the future. And so, that's in another way why I would say we're not opposed to the placement of the bollards or the posts, because I do think over time, the busier and more people that are coming down to downtown, those alleys could be used as our public gathering spaces. And you've seen that some, again, we haven't realized our full vision for it, but on the opposite side of the street where the Blairs are, their antique store, they have the similar problem to what caused you to close the alley next to London's, and it's that when the train comes through, people, instead of waiting and being patient, they immediately want to fly through those alleys and they speed through them. And that's one thing where I would say, again, maybe we haven't taken an even-handed approach. We solved the vehicular traffic issue on one side of Lincoln, but we didn't solve it on the other. We still allow people to cut through that alley.
Ma'am.
So,
Okay, so prior to the Ballards, you still had London's and you still had Daddy Billy's, and Daddy Billy's had just created their outdoor venue. Obviously, they don't have to have use of the alleyway to conduct their business. However, with the special events permit and with the vision that Mr. Keller has created, it almost in itself, by granting him a special events permit, in my opinion, grants an easement of necessity. Now, the reason that you want the lease at this point is because of, as Mr. Worsham stated, your indemnification clause and your insurance policy for liability. Without that lease in place, we obviously are not going to be, even if you say, okay, you've got to serve your alcohol and everybody's got to stay on this side, or you've got to be in this side. We know that there's going to be foot traffic, and we know that both sides are most likely going to be serving alcohol. Do we as a city want to be liable for what happens in that easement or in that alleyway? And my answer is absolutely not. The Ballards are already there. It's already been closed to vehicular traffic. Why don't we indemnify the city and look at it from a liability perspective? Also, in my personal opinion, is a little public safety with some removable barriers that you can easily pick up and move out of the way. I think if you have an occupancy threshold and you say, if you are at this many people, if you have this many patrons, and it's past this time on a Friday and Saturday night, those barriers are easily removable. I went on a Friday night to look at some of the problems and issues that they were having. Mr. Keller was not there, but hopefully your guys said that I came by, and I stayed, and I watched and I looked at all of the issues, and I spoke to the law enforcement personnel that came out and did their walkthroughs, and I asked them about the barriers and how did they feel and how did it affect them and being able to affect public safety. And they said, oh, we love the barriers. The barriers make our job that much easier. So from a liability perspective, and that's all really we need to be concerned about. We do not need to tell this man how to run his business. And we need to just be concerned with what we are doing to protect the citizens. That's all I'm gonna say.
My question from a legal standpoint, if the bollards were not there, period, would we have an indemnification problem? If we would have never approved them, if we yanked the bollards?
Probably not.
Yeah.
If we didn't have a special event permit or anything else.
See, if we approve,
They would just be utilizing the alley like I would if I wanted to walk.
right, if we approve the lease for this purpose,
Then
we gotta approve we gotta approve the whole freaking
Yeah.
alley then, right?
if we don't have a special event permit, there's no liability, right?
But then you close down that outside, and right now that's been great for tourism and bringing business. And when you bring business to Tullahoma with that, you're also bringing business to Daddy Billy's, because we all know that they do the 3-bar crawl. Like, it used to be, 122 West, down to London's, down to Daddy Billy's, and back around. And that's been happening for many, many, many years. Mr.
Right.
Keller is obviously bringing business to downtown Tullahoma, and we want to see that happen. I think that it would be not in the best interest of Tullahoma to try to shut that down. What the lease guarantee, you're not really changing anything, in my opinion. You're still gonna have foot traffic there. All you're changing is who's liable if something happens with this lease.
Well, we're not liable if we don't have any agreements.
Oh,
in
we
place.
are liable.
If we
That's the
don't-
point.
If we don't have any agreements in place, are we liable?
Not in the same sense.
Right. So I think that,
We're no more liable than if there were an accident on Jackson Street,
Right.
which is open to the public generally.
Right.
But we're liable, if we are potentially liable for any kind of accident that occurs on public property.
That's right.
But with the lease, that protects us more, especially if there's
Protects
insurance
us.
requirements. So, but if there is an injury or there's damages that anyone incurs, the insurance is going to take care of.
Or-
We forbid that would happen, but it could.
if we do the lease, are we at risk of any lawsuits or issues from any of the other bars or businesses on that area saying that we've shown favoritism or we've created problems from that? Does that open us up to any other?
Well, obviously there's criticism about that, and as you probably know, rule number one in the law is anybody can sue anybody else for anything. Now, so, sure, we're at risk right now if somebody wants to sue us.
But you're not tempering in whole the use and enjoyment of Daddy Billy's or any other business or patrons from walking through there. I've been down there. They did not stop anybody from being able to pass through. And in fact, if you're only putting the barriers up at a certain time period, in which really that downtown area is really closed to 21 and up patrons anyways, they're not stopping anybody from going through there. But I think it's an extra, safety, precaution to do so. And we can't act like those barriers or that lease will inhibit anybody from being able to enjoy going to the other areas, because it doesn't do that at all.
Mr. Perry, the lease is a non-exclusive lease, meaning they have the right to use it for their purposes, but it's still open to the public for our purposes. So it's not that they can preclude anyone else from using that.
Right, since Daddy Billy's problem, the length, let me understand, was the issue there the length of the barricades they thought were blocking? Is that the issue?
Well, and that's where I would say, I know that Alderman Almacher had one experience down there, but I know I heard from another alderman just today that had a very different experience and was not allowed to walk freely through the alley.
Yeah, I've heard both.
And I think, we could ask Chief Williams or Winston Brooks what they've heard. The complaint has been that people have not been permitted to go through that area. And so it hasn't been left open to pedestrians. What I would say to that, and again, I think I want to give you an opportunity to speak, but what I would say is maybe poor execution is what the problem is. And so I think if it were operated properly under the conditions that this board sets, and that may create an enforcement problem for us, because then we have to make sure that, I guess, every Saturday night that the conditions you set are being followed. But if the conditions were followed, I think we wouldn't have these complaints. Right. For instance, I'll share an exact circumstance. We had a conversation out there about the barricades. I said, we're already getting complaints. People don't like the barricades. Some of your fellow business owners don't like the barricades being put up. We understand that from a safety perspective and from really his licenses require that he controls that area, that he knows minors are not being served, that he knows alcohol isn't leaving the area. The only way for him to do that was to have these bouncers and to control that alley and not let a large crowd of people gather there. So we were sort of between a rock and a hard place with that. I know one business is complaining, but I know it's functional. So we allowed it, but we said, do not put them up until as late as possible in the evening, 9:30 at the earliest. And then we had a complaint on a recent Saturday where, and I understand there was mistakes happen with employees, but the barricades were up in the middle of the afternoon. 3:00 in the afternoon, one of our sergeants went over and had the employees take them down. But that is what creates the feeling that it's not working and that there's a problem. So does that help?
I think what you're looking for is, are we philosophically okay with it? I am, and I don't have any other questions, but with some of the kinks worked out. Yeah.
The restrictions on use.
That was really my first question of all of you is, I need to kind of take the temperature and know if you're just fundamentally opposed to the idea of closing the alley. Let me know that so that we don't waste time bringing you, because we've already spent months working on iterations of this, and so it just felt like, is it time to stop working towards it if whatever I bring you is going to be turned down?
I'm fundamentally opposed to closing the alley with the compromise. You can leave the bollards up there at night, like they do on Bourbon Street, and when those are over, yank those up and let it have traverse during the daytime.
Well, Dr. Blanks, what I would say about that, and we've had conversations about this, I think if that was the way we went, then he has to put a site plan together, and he probably has to come to our Board of Zoning Appeals and get some variances because, for instance, our zoning ordinance only allows a 5-foot fence. A 5-foot fence can be easily climbed over, drinks handed over, passed over, and when he's had some of these crowds, that's why he gets put in a position where he can't say for sure that a minor hasn't gotten in there or a minor hasn't been handed a drink. And so, you know, he's gonna have to probably be allowed to have a different type of fence or a different type of enclosure. So anyway, I just share that with you. He also needs good direction from us. If the closing of the alley is not an option at all, it's not on the table, then that helps him probably make some other decisions about how he's gonna use that site.
And may I ask a question? So we're talking about a full closure of the alley, but there's still that sidewalk portion.
Yeah, but it really, to control the crowds,
At this,
it all has to be controlled.
but that's at
Yeah.
this point. At some point, I mean, I've talked with Mr. Keller, and it seems like he does have a grand plan for that area. When that grand plan is completed, that won't be an issue, correct?
No, it'll still be an issue.
I don't know,
I mean, if there's,
And
You still have traffic flow back and forth.
you'll still have traffic back and forth, but it'll be enclosed, like the passing of booze across the thing is not gonna be an issue if you have a high fence, right?
Can you?
No, I mean, he's doing a really good job now, but
Yeah.
we're not gonna have, those ballards need to be up anyways, because there doesn't need to be
When I
car
say traffic, I'm
traffic.
talking
Yeah.
about
They
pedestrian.
we don't need to have car traffic through there anyways because of the businesses that are down through that area. There's no need for car traffic through there unless it's for emergency personnel and they have keys to take those down. So effectively, the alleyway's already closed. We're only
I
talking
disagree
about.
wholeheartedly that it shouldn't be open to pedestrian, to vehicular traffic at some time. You know, there are people downtown that have come to me that are not in favor of the ballards.
Yeah, I've heard that as well.
So, you know, I'm their representative. I've got their backs on it.
Can I
Like I
ask-
said, though, if you'll put them up
At a certain
during
time.
the peak
During a
business
certain
hours, I can compromise with that.
Right,
But
okay.
Put them up during the day. So, you know, your deliveries can be made, garbage trucks,
Got it.
mail, yada, yada, yada.
Is that what their concern is, deliveries, garbage trucks, et cetera?
Well, I mean, there's different, I know Mr. Keller has, you know, their delivery schedules now because of COVID are not standard, you know, so they're varied and different one. You know, I think the different restaurants and bars down there use some of the same delivery people, but not all. So it can vary, but, you know, that hopefully will get back to a normal schedule eventually.
I would love to see it open to certain part. Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
I would not for 1 minute propose to Mr. Keller how to operate a wonderful business that he has down there. I think he could do a great job of that. But what I am fundamentally opposed to is leasing city-owned public property to an individual for his private use, to the exclusion of other people. So this lease is what our meeting tonight, this planning session is about, this lease. I am fundamentally opposed to the city leasing public streets to anyone, not just to here. We've had other situations come before the board in the past where someone wanted to lease part of the street for his business. We fundamentally always disagreed with giving away through lease or selling public property,
Mr.
which
Worthington.
is our city street.
Matt, I have a question. A minute ago, you said that this would not be an exclusive use agreement, though. So it would still be open to the other businesses and patrons and citizens to walk through. Really, the biggest change, again, to me, that I see with this lease is that the idea that he can operate his business effectively, that there will be an easement adjoining, essentially, the outside park and his, so patrons can walk back and forth, and it indemnifies us from liability. And that is the biggest, but we are not saying in this lease that he's the only person that can use this and he can use it in whatever fashion he deems appropriate. That's not what the lease says at all, am I correct? So it's not an exclusive use. It is still open to public foot traffic, and he will be responsible for any restrictions as far as if we say, like Mr. Blanks was saying, you know, we don't want the ballards up but at certain times, or we don't want the barriers up but at certain times. But at any time, it's still open to foot traffic and other individual use.
And that's too where I would say I've treated the special event permit like a pilot or an attempt to see how could this work, and how many complaints are we going to take before we agree it's not working. The average citizen, when they see barricades across the alley and a bouncer there checking IDs, to them, it's closed. It's effectively closed. Whether the lease says it's non-exclusive and whether he says that he's not letting people through or not, people are telling us they think it's closed, it appears closed, and they're not being allowed through.
Well, that's why we would need restrictions.
I think just what I've seen on paper, this seems like a great idea. However, I just don't know how you're able to put what's on paper in that alley safely with 19-year-olds and people who do want to walk through, who don't have any desire to go into London's. And I think, I will say right now, I'm certainly leaning against doing this lease. But one thing, if this was something that we as a board decide to do, I would certainly want a very specific section for what does quiet possession look like. I would want that spelled out really well, like how many complaints is not quiet anymore? How many underage serving is no longer quiet possession? I would want that very specific, because if we do go into this, that we should have a way to annul it if it's not being followed correctly.
We can tweak the lease any way the board desires. This is just a template for the beginning, and
Sure.
then from that we can work. And if they don't agree to that, then we're going to have a lease.
I'd really like to see this work.
Me too.
I'd really love to see this work. And we have kind of been on a trial period. I've got one that's a couple times a week. I want to see it work. I have some concerns, not just, it's a bar area. I have some concerns bar area. I don't know who it is. I don't know if it's London's. I don't know if it's Daddy Billy's. I don't know who, but I feel like I'm seeing more and more police officers up there in that area.
Is that because they're patrolling or they're being called?
I've seen blue lights pass, called,
Yeah.
and I don't know who it is, which
Chief
bar.
Williams, would you share some of the recent activity?
We have seen an uptick in recent police activity in the area. We've seen there has been a upswing in the amount of assaults that we've been summoned to the area to respond to. There's been activity that we've responded to for public intoxication where people have been overserved in the area. So there's been quite a bit more activity in that area that has required us to respond to it over the past several months.
And when you say that area, we're including parking lots and the other business. We're talking about the district, not just.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
I have a question. What is the time frame that there's a lot of the police?
It's late into the evening.
Late, fine.
I know I was out working one evening with night shift, and this was probably around 12:30, sometime in that area when we responded to a disturbance call over there. But
So with the barricade, I know that we aren't telling people how to run their business. I would love to see this somehow be figured out. As an event producer, I've seen booze management, in every kind of park, random place in the world. We've built them out, and I feel like this is feasible to do in that space. It just, barricades aren't working. Alderman Almacher pointed out the thing that I always used on events in terms of booze. I feel like there's a way to make this work, but the execution right now needs to be tweaked significantly. And maybe, and I know that Mr. Keller also has a plan, this amazing plan for later on, that I think that, you know, if there is a fence, which it would require a variance, that would help deal with the movement, the people movement, right? So I think it's more, for me, I want to find a way for us to figure out this philosophically.
So I also think that a 10-year lease is a little exorbitant. I noticed that that's what this was written out to be. I think it needs to be a much shorter temporary.
For a year.
This
one says
this says 10 years.
Section 2.
His attorney may have
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 2030.
I was like, did I read that? Did I pull that out of any? No, it says.
Well, the lease agreement that I prepared was for a year,
Oh,
and I was
yeah.
going to even put the reason that it was terminated on 30 days' notice if there's non-compliance with the provision.
There is a 30-day notice provision. I read it, but this is a 10-year lease.
Yeah,
which is
2A
a
says
little
10.
exorbitant for sure. I think we need to rein that back, and probably it does need to be a year lease so that we can look back at that. And I think that like Mr. Blank said, that it would definitely have to have some specific, and Ms. Dunn said, some specific barricades can't go up before 10 p.m. on a Friday and Saturday night kind of
They
thing.
need to be movable. So that we
They
can
need to be movable,
I could get behind that.
If I might point out.
you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Their proposal was for the 10 years. Ours was for 1 year with termination.
Right, we need to do this as a
Came back for
1-year
30.
trial. Let's make sure it's working kind of thing before we hop into a 10-year lease. I think y'all.
I am going to say one thing about that. I agree.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that as a business owner, it's a risk.
Yeah.
You know what I
If you
mean?
want to put money in,
Yeah.
I would want longer.
What are you guys proposing?
I'm okay with the 10-year. If we get it worked out, should we ask Joseph?
Yeah,
you guys-
like,
Yeah, you want to come talk? Just tell us what you think.
he's like hanging out back there not talking.
Yeah.
With the mask, I can't read the expressions.
Right. It's true that there has been a lot of challenges. When this COVID thing first started, you know, we voluntarily closed, you know, on the morning of St. Patrick's Day, and just stayed closed for several months, reopened for 12 days, closed for several more weeks. So we were closed just shy of 5 months total. What I was, you know, reading online, cities were using public spaces to where restaurants could move their tables out, spread everything out, try to get as much in the fresh air as possible. That was my goal with just putting, I didn't want picnic tables and no hardscape and no bathrooms. That what is out there is not what I wanted, but I thought that it was necessary to get back to even a reasonable amount of sales to stay in business. So when we opened, what I didn't realize is that we were going to do no sales all day and then do gigantic sales in a matter of a few hours at night. I've got a chart here that I've got my September of 2019 to compare with 2020, and in the peak hours at night, we would do between, you know, $1,000 and $1,500 per hour. On some of our busiest nights, we have a $2,500 hour, followed by a $3,000 hour, followed by a $3,500 hour, a $4,000 hour, and nearly another $4,000 hour. Just, I mean, these are the type of sales that we couldn't anticipate doing. We thought we'd do 70% of what we were doing, not twice as much as what we were doing. And so we've scrambled to try to adjust to the problems with having no customers all day and then just a wave. And the very first problem that we ran into was a large group of customers from out of the area, Davidson County, Rutherford County. We knew none of them, so we just kind of got overrun. It was terrible. My staff was ready to quit. They didn't. So I was like, well, what do we do? It's like, well, let's get some barricades and try to corral this crowd. So we did, and it worked out as far as keeping underagers out, outside alcohol and drugs out. For 3 or 4 weeks, they would just be liter bottles laying on the ground where people would just hide in the dark and pour their own drinks. And when you can't control what they ingest, you're going to have problems. And we did. We're still having a few problems, but we've been able to hire several security people. They're figuring out as like we are, trying to manage a space that's much larger than the interior of London's is a challenge that I didn't expect. I hired a booking agent. We started booking bands to try to bring a crowd, and it has worked beyond what I thought was even possible. If you compare these two, we're doing days that are $10,000 more than the day the year before or the year before. It's just, it's there's a lot more foot traffic. Usually like in 2009, the average number of customers we did was about 25 to 35 customers a day in 2008, 2000. That would be the average. And now we averaged 260 customers a day last year. And just to pick one day, 1,100 customers, in one day, just in this month. But we're doing no sales Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday and Saturday are just, crushing it, but it's a challenge. My staff has never ever had to deal with a $4,000 hour followed by a $3,700 hour that followed a $3,500. It's just, it's just the type of sales that we weren't prepared for. We're trying to deal with it now by pulling more staff from the day shift where there's no sales into the night shift and getting them used to that schedule, and hiring. Or I think I've hired 6 security guards, and they're trying to figure out it as well. Eventually, what I would like to do is build a brick wall around the property that was the park with one gate in the alley, to where we can deal with that space separately and London separately. And if there was a rule or whatever where people can carry a beverage from one to the other, then we wouldn't need a barricade at all.
Yeah, so when I came, that was somebody from Ms. Moody's office had called and said, are you still having to carry those drinks across the barrier?
We didn't know what was legal. So what we've got is one security guard that is taking the drinks and carrying them across the alley to.
Which is not an effective use of your security guard, really.
I think the thing that I saw when we've been out there, and I don't think that the way that the green space is currently set up, the way that the fences and the openings, and I know why I know why it is the way that it is. But typically, imagine it if this was a business there. London's would be controlling the alcohol and beer and occupants inside of the doors of their business, and this business next door would be controlling the crowd that comes in and out of their doors. It's really not different than what happens between London's and Daddy Billy's. It's the same idea. And we didn't have to give up or lease any of the alley to allow people to walk from London's to Daddy Billy's. I think, so what we had talked about at one time was treat these entrances to your green space just like you would a doorway.
Yeah.
And instead of having the security guards and checking IDs at either end of the alley, check them at the entrance and exit of the green space. I think that...
Which is what we've done the last 2 weekends.
And it works when there's lower numbers, right? It works when there's a little bit of a smaller crowd. But those really bad weekends that you're referring back to, you were telling me there were literally 100 or more people just all gathering in the alley in between the two, and that's what he's trying to avoid happening, because once, like you've said to me many times, once the crowd's there, you can't get rid of them. I mean, so you're trying to prevent them from doing that.
We've got tables, we've got lights, we've got a band. Sit at a table. Why stand in the alley? But
and that's what's different. People don't hang out at the patio of Daddy Billy's and then step 3 feet and stand in the alley and hang out. But they're doing that in the alley in between the green space and
So the
London.
barricades, though, they make it to where people, you have to go in or you have to go out.
The way we had it set up was we had 2 sets of barricades directly from the middle door of London's to the area that was the park. Then we had a barricade on each end to where we would ID on each end that would cover the entrance of the park and the 3 doors of London's. And then we had one security guard that would float and say, you can't stand in the alley, you either have to be there or here. It worked, but there's problems. I mean, what I would love to do is be able to use the barricades for 9 more weekends, from 8:30 to 1. And then hopefully I could show these type of sales to my bank and say, I need to build a real wall. I need to put real gates. I need to have a bar, bathrooms, pavilion, everything built out there. And I need to do it when the weather's terrible, which is going to be December, January, February. And then hopefully reopen in the spring with everything the way it should be.
And that's why we need some clear direction. I think each of us need it, because what typically would have happened with a new business like this opening is they have to get an occupancy permit from the city to operate. That didn't happen here. I mean, a lot of things are not your typical, and I feel like I can defend that. COVID hit, we have an anchor in our downtown in London's, and yeah, we were as flexible as we could possibly be to try to help him keep his business.
And I
don't think there's anything wrong in that.
They've given me a great deal of help, and
But
I appreciate it.
But then I would just add that, but now what we never envisioned, just like you said, we never envisioned a full occupancy London's and a full occupancy outside and people trying to gather in the alley. Oh, and by the way, Daddy Billy's is full.
Well, as far
we
as
never
the interior of
imagined that when we're
London's, the
working
interior
through
of
this.
London's is not full. It's very sparse inside. Where our sales are at or outside in these few hours of a weekend.
But what we have to do now, as we move back more towards normal, is you do have to put a plan together, and we've got to get to that occupancy permit and meet all the requirements. But we got to have good direction, because I think the fundamental thing is, can you consider use of the alley as part of this green space and enclose the whole thing, or can he not enclose the whole thing and he's got to deal with the green space as its own entity? That is really the question.
So not the temporary thing, it's a question about the permanent thing, correct?
Yeah, because I think he's got to start working that
It's not gonna
direction.
change the crowd if he builds a wall.
I think it's really important
Is
that
it?
if there's.
It won't change the crowd.
How do you mean?
The size of the crowd's not gonna change if you build a permanent wall. I mean, you'll still have people.
Well, with a
hanging out
permanent
in the alley,
wall,
right?
people wouldn't be standing able to watch a performance through a brick wall. They would go in,
But
or they
hear
would
it.
go,
They would hear it. I hear it at my house.
okay.
So,
The use of the alleyway wouldn't really be an issue if you had a more permanent structure for people to enter into.
Well, and I think one of the things, you were saying you represent some people who want to see it open.
yeah.
I think there's also a group of people out there, and, we've talked a lot about Dowdy Billy's. They're not here, but I think they would tell you their problem with it is they want to know, why can't we close the whole alley?
But I was saying, once you do this, you've opened up Pandora's box. And, if we do this, then, what would keep them from putting a band out there in their porch and they'd do $4,000 an hour too,
I mean, they have.
They have it, they do
They
that.
have
They
bands
do,
out there.
Yeah, they
And
have an
they've had it
outdoor
in-
venue too.
I mean, when I was closed, they had all of my business, and their business. They were packed
Yeah.
for several months, but,
And they have an interest in wanting, if I was them, if he shuts down, guess where the business comes back to? Me. So in my opinion, I think it's to everybody's benefit to try to keep everybody open and working together.
I mean, I'm trying to work out the kinks in how we actually do this, but with the guy that's booking my bands, we're really bringing in some interesting music, which is kind of, I think, what it would take to get that downtown back where it should be.
I've just got, I will just say that I'm very concerned about permanent structures going up. That's just me personally, and I'm thinking about logistically, what if there was a serious situation where everybody had to get out of that area quickly, and you've got to funnel them all through this purposefully small gate, and then I don't know. I don't know about the bathrooms, like what, I hope your business continues for a long time, but what are we going to do? Who's in charge of those bathrooms in 15 years when this lease is up? I mean, like, how do we?
It's his property.
With the property that I would be building on, it's owned by me, so the building that's on there would be a permanent bathroom. The pavilion and everything in the bar area would all be on my property. And the gate, as far as egress goes, if you have something that's 32 feet wide, you don't have to worry about a funneling effect. It would take the fire marshal to tell you, but at a certain width, it's almost like running through an open field.
Well, I do want to clarify and make sure, and I'm sorry I didn't say this at the beginning, but the green space itself is not owned by the city, was not ever owned by the city. It's owned by Mr. Keller, so he owns both sides of the alley. It's just the alley that we're talking about leasing. So I just want to make sure that that part's understood.
Thank you. Sure.
Okay.
Can I suggest maybe we go around quickly and get your philosophical
Yeah, and
yes or no and kind of a closing?
Yeah, I'm not asking for you all to help us figure out how it's going to operate. I think some of you have already given us some good direction on the items that are important to you for us to work through, and that's more what I was looking for.
So let's do everybody yes or no.
Well, but you said, wait, so we're saying yes or no?
I think she wants to know whether we're philosophically opposed or not.
No, I'm not.
Maybe some,
Proceed.
I guess, like a summary comment.
I think I'm
How do you
philosophically-
feel about continuing, for us to continue spending time trying to negotiate a lease and, understand, because you're going to get the same calls that I do. Part of this evolution and figuring things out is that temporarily we have had times when the alley is closed with these barricades, not the posts. We're talking about like bicycle rack type barricades that are closing the alley. And so that's what people are complaining about. But I feel like we have to do some interim things. We're still continuing to work with him and figure things out. On the one extreme, we could not be doing that, and we could say, you don't have an occupancy permit to do what you're doing, close it down. We're not saying that. You know, on the other end, we could go back to, I guess, just saying, you know, treat it, keep it under the special event and say this whole area is a special event space. You figure it out. You know, what I'm saying, we've been working in the middle and just slowly making adjustments and trying to make it better and work through the issues that come up. So that's, I'm just trying to get some direction. Do you want me to continue spending my time doing that and working towards a lease?
So pro lease or not pro lease?
Does that make sense?
I'm philosophically okay with the lease for now, with the understanding that I think that Mr. Keller at some point is going to do something permanent there.
Right.
That's it.
I don't know, I'm kind of in the middle right now, because like, it's clearly, it's so important for so many reasons, and I know like you're a good business owner and you're doing a lot of really, really good things. I just would like to see this like really tight as far as, you know.
I'm trying to do my best to tighten
Oh, I
up,
know.
but we've run into problems.
I know you are.
And I think that over the next 9 weekends,
Yeah.
I can show to my bank, this works. I need.
Well, you gotta show you showed it to your bank too, but you gotta show to us.
To me, I think
But that would be
the reason why.
the permanent wall, the permanent bathrooms, the permanent pavilion.
Just to me, I think it's exactly right what Jenna had said earlier, is like, we don't need to be telling you how to run a business at all. I don't think that that's right. But right now, the city, that alley belongs to the people. And I think it's important that I don't want to tell you how to run this business. So it's either going to be, yes, this is tip top, amazing, or no, this isn't going to work at all. And that's where I'm at right now.
If you're coming around the table, I want to congratulate you, Mr. Keller, on having the best hamburger in town.
Yes, it is.
I also want to tell you that not to you, but to anyone who wants to lease a public street in Tullahoma, I'll be philosophically opposed to giving someone a lease for our public streets. But wish you the very best with your 2 parcels there to make the very most out of them that you possibly can.
My turn? All right. If you could pull the bollards at the time period I said, do whatever you gotta do to make your business grow.
My turn? How long have you been using the cover charge?
We started a few weeks ago when we started putting live music outside.
Okay. Have you seen a decrease in like the fights and all that since you've had the cover charge?
Well, yes, and we got more people to deal with trouble.
Okay.
Whenever people that would refuse a cover charge are usually the type that, you know, would be more likely to fight. In my opinion, you know, when somebody's like, I'm not going to pay $5 or $10 to see the band, and the people that would are less likely to cause trouble. Not to say there's no trouble. You get 200 or 300 people together, some bad things will happen, you know. But now that we see that we can draw $250 and do a cover charge, I can pay for the security guards to keep an eye on everything. And these guys weren't professional security guards; they're kind of learning it on the fly.
Okay.
Kind of like we all. It's not the ideal situation.
But with or without the cover charge, so Novia, I think people are still allowed, if they're saying, I'm not going to London, we're just passing through going to Daddy Billy's, they're still allowed to pass through there, correct?
Yes, but some of my security guards may not know because we've had to hire them, you know, week to week. So sometimes my communication skills with my security team may not be as ideal as it should, but I can improve on that. You know, the last several weeks for me have been, I haven't been able to concentrate on my business as much as I wanted to, but now I can.
Okay.
And so I'm able to deal with a lot more issues.
Okay. Okay, because my experience this past weekend, we were just walking through the alley. And we did get some pushback because they wanted us to pay $5 to just walk through the alley. And I told them I'm not paying $5 just to walk through this alley.
Right, and they shouldn't have done that, but I may have not told that
Okay.
particular person that.
Okay.
It's something that I definitely, you know, I've got to have a meeting with these guys, because we've hired them so quickly that I don't even know half of them personally. I only know about half of them personally.
Okay. I'm
So-
sort of in the middle with this, just like Alderman Dunn, because there's so many pieces.
I would love to ask for 9 weeks. And if I can't figure it out, you know, that gets me to the end of probably decent weather. If we do well, we build the type of infrastructure that's going to fix all the problems. And if we do it in the months that we would be able to operate in, like December, January, February, March, you know, and then hopefully reopen it as a brand new thing with everything that I can think of addressed. You know, the main thing being restrooms. I mean, I don't have restrooms out there. My restrooms are inside. So if you're having a drink outside and you have to go to the restroom, you have to cross that alley. Once I have restrooms there, you won't have to cross that alley. The other problem is I have a kitchen that's on the other side, so if food goes out there, it goes across the alley. One of the things that, like, you know, I was telling Daniel, I think I told Mr. Blanks, is that, you know, for every table that sits down, a server hits that table between 4.5, 6.5 times. So if every seat is sat, and we have an average of, and we historically have had about a 2.6 table turnover, it's thousands of trips just for the servers across the alley, and no telling how many of customers crossing back in to use the restroom. So as far as not having, you know, vehicle traffic, it's advantageous to not have vehicles coming up there.
That's all I have.
I love it. I love the outdoor area. I think it's a great idea. I think the plans that you've talked about in general, I think we're still recorded, so I won't talk about them, or can change the downtown. I'm disappointed the jalapeno poppers aren't on the menu. I do have some concerns with not just that area in general, and that's something that we address separately. I had some issues kind of initially with the alleyway being closed, but I went to a couple different cities over the past week. I've got to travel all over Middle Tennessee delivering some stuff, and nobody says an alleyway has to have cars. Nobody says that it has to be a drive thing. It's property that we can make use of whatever we want to do with. So I kind of got over my mental block that way. I want to find something that works for everybody downtown and make sure that everybody feels included, because if one does good, everybody does good. And so I'm not opposed to it. I want to see you succeed. I'm okay with the 9 weeks, and what I'd really like to say is figure out a way. Let's make it work, figure it out.
I'm gonna try my best.
No, yeah, and I know you are.
We're figuring it out week by week.
Yeah.
We're kind of like Edison, we're figuring out.
I hope it works in any way that we can.
Well, based on the sales, I mean, we're doing something right. We just got to stop doing things that are not right.
So I've spoken a lot tonight, so I won't keep everybody up. I did want to tell you my sincerest condolences, and for anybody on the board, he's just lost somebody very near and dear to him.
Thank you.
His father, and that's one of the reasons why he has not been, and why you may have ran into some issues. So that's very understandable as to with these huge crowds and you not being, head in the game. I could definitely understand that. So I thought that was important. I hope you didn't mind me sharing that. I do feel like it is so important that we do not try to run your business and tell you what you need to do as far as that's concerned. My biggest concern is indemnification of the city, and I feel like a lease and public safety issues, having the barriers up at a certain time are the best way to go to protect our citizens and to protect the city. So that's all.
Thank you for coming.
Point of privilege. I go to the bathroom.
Anyone else have any further? Thank you, Mr. Keller. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Ms. Lee, do you have anything further?
I know, I'm like,
You have-
or water or restrooms.
You have anything further?
I
Ms. Lee?
don't. Thanks for having that
No, I
discussion.
think we're going
And you
to
can
adjourn
tell.
in 30 seconds.
Don't talk about food or restrooms or water or anything.
On anything, right? On anything.
So, did you enjoy it?
I did. I did.
You're poor people thinking that this is just gonna be a quick meeting.
Yes, sir.
That was just